Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second standardization session from the project CYLCOMED. I'm João Rodrigues. I am a cybersecurity researcher at INOV, and today I'll talk about risk management for cybersecurity, and we'll talk about standards ISO 27001, 27701, and 27005. So this webinar will be recorded, and if you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A box. So we will see what risk is, how it is managed, and then go through the standards 27005, 27001, 27701. Okay, so what is risk and how it is managed? First, we have to explain two concepts. We need to explain what a threat is and what a vulnerability is. So a threat is anything with potential to cause harm to information systems or assets. It depends on the environment and cannot be controlled by any organization. It only exists and we have to deal with it. A threat can be of several natures. We have cyber threats like malware, ransomware, viruses, and so on. We have social engineering threats like phishing, email compromises, unauthorized access through password guessings. So these threats exist whether the organization wants it or not. It does not depend on the organization, right? So to evaluate the threat, it's important to inventory the assets within the organization and then go through a threat analysis process referring to a threat catalog, studies that exist, expert opinions, and organizations' historical records of attacks. A vulnerability, on the other hand, is a weakness in the information system, system security procedures, internal controls, or any implementation that can be exploited or triggered by a threat source. So vulnerabilities can be controlled by the organization. And examples of vulnerabilities and aligned with cyber threats, we have software flaws, outdated software, no patching. Associated with social engineering, we have lack of awareness of the employees, like lack of adequate training for IT professionals, executives, personnel, HR professionals, and no email protection. And related to unauthorized access, we have default settings on devices, which could have default passwords, very easily cracked, software flaws again. And we need to do a vulnerability analysis on each identified asset of the organization. And we need to recur to expert opinion, organizational historical records, available information on the assets, so on and so forth. So now, what is the risk? So risk is a combination of a threat and a vulnerability. So important to note is that a risk does not have only a technical nature. It could be procedural, could be managerial, and a cybersecurity and privacy risk has to do with or is related to losing confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which will impact the operations, assets, individuals, other organizations, users, and clients. It also raises compliance risks, which has to do with the rules of the organization, the policies, the law that you must follow, the governance structure or processes, and any practice that the organization is using. And as for properties of the risks, we have the likelihood, which is the probability or frequency of occurrence of a risk. We have an example here in the right, risk likelihood, which has a scale from 1 to 5, being 1 a rare event of occurring, and being 5 almost certain to occur. We have the impact to the organization, which must consider several factors first. Here we have an example of safety, service facility, compliance, image or reputation of the organization, claims, compliance, environment, budget, contracts. It depends a lot on the organization. And then we have the consequence score. The consequence has to do with measuring the potential costs or consequences should the risk occur. So here we have a scale from 1 to 5. This is, again, an example. Consequence of 1 is insignificant. Consequence of 5 means catastrophic. And then we have the risk level. So the risk level is a combination of the likelihood and the consequence score. Okay. This, again, depends on the organization, depends on the method that they are deploying for risk level evaluation. But here, again, is an example where we have colored the combination of the likelihood and the consequence score, and then we assign a risk tolerance. So if the risk level is green, we are in the good zone. We have to assure that risk remains at this level. This is what we want. If we are in the yellow zone, the risk is tolerable. The cost to reduce does not compensate the risk. So basically, I'm going to accept the risk. The orange zone, we have the tolerable risk if the risk reduction is impracticable. There is no technology for that. There's no process for that. It's impossible to implement. So we have to accept it as well. And then we have the ones that are not tolerable, which we colored here in red. So all these pieces here is termed risk criteria. And this is defined or determined by the business leaders of the organization. And it is used for technical personnel to do the risk evaluation. After a risk evaluation takes place, decisions must be made whether to implement controls or not. So what is a control? So control is something that we put in place in order to control the vulnerability. If we control the vulnerability, we control a component of the risk and we lower the probability of something occurring, of a risk occurring, okay? To implement controls, one needs the resources, a governance structure, we need approval from executive directors, and of course, once implemented, we need to monitor them. Our controls could have several types of controls as well. So related to cyber threats, we have the frequent software updates, frequent antivirus updates, auto patching mechanisms, backup servers. Related to social engineering, we have awareness and training of the personnel, IT professionals. We have spam protection for emails, attachment removal mechanisms, and for unauthorized access, we have changing the default settings of the devices, pre-screen software patches as well. And let's think about a specific example. Let's consider the ransomware cyber attack or cyber threat. This exists and we cannot change the fact. And let's imagine that our organization don't have backups, right? Backup is something that we can implement easily. So this is part of a vulnerability. The combination of the ransom and no backup will lead to the integrity and availability risks, which in turn will impact the operation, the assets, individuals, so on and so forth, and also raise compliance risks. Let's imagine that our organization is a hotel, and let's consider only the safety parameter or factor of the risk impact, right? So a ransomware attack, it's possible in the hotel, but there is basically no safety issues to the clients. So the risk level would be in the green zone. So we have to assure that it remains at this level. And one would think that concerning safety, we don't need to implement any control. But of course, we have other problems that will be raised, like payment services will not work and other commodities will affect the quality of the service. But let's consider only safety here for the moment. So consider only safety, we don't need to implement any controls. But if our organization is a hospital, then it's different. So again, the attack is possible, But safety, patient safety is very important. It could have catastrophic impact, because if medical doctors don't have the right information or don't have information at all, or the device is not working because of the consequences of the attack, then patient could be severely injured. They will not get treatment. So this is in the red zone. A control must be implemented. If we implement backup servers, we will not have the backup problems. So the ransomware is still there, but if the risk materializes, we still have backups. We still have processes in place in order to circumvent this problem. So we are lowering the risk, and we are in the green zone. We are good to go. At this slide, I put an example of an NHS report from the United Kingdom, where for the factors of patient safety, we have the negligible consequence score, which is minimal injury to the patient or for the treatment. We have a minor consequence, which has to do with minor implications for patient safety. A moderate, which is the treatment or service has significantly reduced effectiveness, or there is major patient safety implications. 4, we have major injury leading to long-term incapacity or disability. And catastrophic, we have an issue which impacts on a large number of patients, increased probability of death, or irreversible health effects. So I have to stress this. These factors and this consequence score is defined by executive level personnel, or it's delegated directly by them to other people. As for the likelihood score, again, this is the example from the same source, where we have the likelihood score from 1 to 5, and the frequency of occurrence, or the probability of it happening. So we have the descriptor of rare, this will probably never happen or occur, or it is not expected to occur for years. Unlikely, do not expect it to happen, expect it to occur at least annually. The possible likelihood might happen or recur occasionally, expected to occur monthly. Likely, will probably happen, recur, but it is not a persistent issue, expected to occur weekly. And we have the almost certain, will undoubtedly happen or occur, possibly frequently, and expected to occur daily. Okay, so what we saw up until now can be summarized in a risk management flow diagram that we have here. This diagram follows closely the standard ISO 31000, which gives guidance on general risk management. The reason we put it here is because ISO 27705 is based on this standard. Okay. So what we saw up until now, the scope, context, and criteria component of the phase. We saw the risk assessment, the identification, the analysis, and the evaluation, and then the risk treatment. And to develop the evaluation criteria, we have to identify access and control. We need governance model. We need stakeholders involvement. We need resources and tools for implementing that. The decisions, analysis, and risk treatment choices must be recorded and reported to the appropriate people and stakeholders. So this must be defined somehow within the organization. And for that, we need risk reports and risk registers. And these reports and registers must be communicated in appropriate ways, whether it's newsletter, whether in meetings. To further complete the analysis, specialists should be consulted in order to take into account other information that the organization did not consider, for example. And proper information communication enable a better decision-making on needed resources and where does these resources need to be put, okay? And also, very important, risk landscape is changing every day. So it is important to make periodic assessments in order to have the up-to-date information. And moreover, all this system, let's say, or this process needs monitoring and reviewing, and it should be evaluated with defined key performance indicators, key risk indicators, and risk management performance metrics, other performance metrics that might be important to consider. So ISO 27005, which is guidance on managing information security risk, is a standard aiming at implementing cybersecurity and privacy protections following ISO 31000. We have here a simplified view of the process flow of ISO 27005. We try to put as much information as we could here in order to make this slide a reference one in order to know from one point to the other of the process flow what needs to be done. Okay. In the context establishment stage, first we have to have the involvement of the decision-making people. We need a decision-making methods. If we don't have one, we have to define one, and we need to allocate resources. Decision makers must define the risk factor based on stakeholders, strategic value, asset criticality, and so on. Risk factor is the likelihood and the impact factors that we saw earlier. Then the risk evaluation criteria is defined based on the asset importance, the cost for the organization, disruption consequences. Then the risk acceptance criteria must be defined taking into account several factors like activity, operation, finance, technology, social, and the output are minus risk follow-up plan, progress reports, risk evaluation criteria, risk acceptance criteria. So those are the outputs of this phase. Then we have the identify risk stage. In this stage, the asset identification is the first part of it. So this is dedicated to identifying software, hardware, people, network devices, location, everything that can be considered assets that are important for the organization. Then we need to identify the threats to each of the assets. We're going to incident history. We already saw that, catalogs, etc., expert opinion. We have to identify the implemented controls. There might be some already implemented. We need to see the documentation of the controls, the tests that were performed, talk to the information security professionals that implemented it. And then we have to identify the vulnerabilities. For the organization, we need to consider what types of vulnerability there is and several dimensions like to the organization, to the processes and procedures, to the management routine, human resources, physical parts, systems, network, etc. Okay. So the output of this stage is asset inventory, controls, threats, and vulnerabilities associated to each of the identified assets. Then we have the risk analysis phase. In this stage, an impact survey is made taking into account relevant incident scenarios, identified threats and vulnerabilities, affected assets, consequences for the assets and processes. This will be followed by impact evaluation and probability analysis. Within the impact evaluation, we have to consider the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the assets within the scenarios. We need to see several perspectives on it. We need to see the technical, the financial, human, reputation, and other relevant perspectives like health, safety, for a hospital, for example. And we have to make the asset evaluation based on the importance for the organization's business goal. So this is based on the asset restitution times, operational consequences. As for the probability analysis, We need to consider applicable statistics, history of incidents, threats, vulnerabilities, catalogs, any information that you can get about it. For determining the risk level, the risk scenarios must be already assigned, right? The combination of vulnerabilities, threats, and sequence of events to materialize the risk. Upon the scenario, the probability and impact will be determined. And this probability and impact can be of quantitative or qualitative nature. So if it is a quantitative nature, it is a numeric scale to evaluate impacts and probabilities. If it is a qualitative measure, it is something more like, for example, a scale from rare to from low impact to high impact, something like that. It's not numeric. Okay. So the output of this stage is the incident scenario, the consequences of this scenario, the impact evaluation, asset evaluation, probability analysis, and risk level estimation. During the risk evaluation phase, the estimated risk will be compared with the risk tolerance, and the risk that can be aggregated should be evaluated together to form a higher score. And then we have to make a risk evaluation decision. So do we accept the study, or do we have to reformulate it based on the quality of the information, based on the actuality of the information? So we have to either accept the risk levels or reevaluate. We have to consider the impacts, the probabilities, the confidence of the data. Once this decision is to accept it, we need to make the risk prioritization. So what risks need immediate attention, what needs moderate attention, so on and so forth, so that you can prioritize what controls to implement first. The output of this stage is evaluation of risk estimation via the risk tolerance, the risk aggregation evaluation, risk evaluation decision, and risk prioritization. And the risk treatment phase. So, according to the defined properties, priorities, one can either avoid the risk, like stop using a software without support or change entirely the process, accept the risk, leave the risk as it is, mitigate the risk, putting controls to contain or lower the probability of occurrence, or we can transfer the risk, like contracting an insurance service. So the output would be the risk treatment. So this is a summary of the ISO 27005 process flow. And now we are going to talk about the ISO 27001. So I want to manage cybersecurity risk. Where do I start? How do I maintain it after I implement something to manage the security risk? So ISO 27001 specifies requirements for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving an information security management system, or ISMS, within an organization. An information security management system is a systematic approach for protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. This systematic approach is organized in the ISO 27001 in a plan, do, check, act cycle, where in the plan phase, establish the ISMS, we need to establish the context of the organization. We need to define the context. So the industry that we are working in, the stakeholders that are involved, internal culture of the country, the economics, everything that might influence the functioning of the organization must be defined in the context. Then how the organization meets the expectations of the other parties, the stakeholders, the competitors, and then we have to define the scope of the ISMS. So the scope means that we have to choose if we want to implement this system for a business unit, the entire organization, only some processes. This is the scope of the ISMS. One thing that is important also is the leadership. We have to have a proper leadership, and we have to show commitment of people from the leadership in approving policies, approving decisions, defining the roles and the responsibilities, and enforcing the policies. We also have the clause for planning, and here is where the information security objectives or controls are chosen. So ISO 27001 has an Annex A, which are control objectives. And these objectives should be listed in a statement of applicability or SOA with all the controls. And for each control, the organization must say for each of the assets what they implemented. And if they did not implement some controls, they have to say why. So this is a very important document. And it requires addressing the risks and opportunities to the organization. The do stage, implement and operate the ISMS. We have clause 7, which has to do with the support of the whole ISMS. We have to consider the right resources, right level of competences. We have to ensure that people have the adequate secure awareness and training. And we have to implement and run the ISMS. So we need to have the technology in place, the people in place. We have to fulfill all the requirements that was defined in the planning phase. The check phase, monitor and review in the ISMS. So in here we have clause 9, which is the performance evaluation of the ISMS. We have to have monitoring systems in place, systems, processes, reports, so on and so forth. We have to conduct internal and even external audits to the system, and we need to prove that we are managing well the ISMS. So we need to have management reviews in the ISMS. In the act phase, we have to maintain and improve the ISMS. So there is always room for improvement, and there is always the landscape of threat that is changing. So this is a very important part, because we need to evaluate if, and from this information from the check, from the monitor and review phase, we need to see if the ISMS is still adequate, or we need to do any improvement on processes, procedures, if there is lacking some skills, so on and so forth. So those are the clauses from the ISO 27001 from 4 to 10. And I have listed here Annex A controls or security objectives. They are organized by organizational objectives, people objectives, physical objectives, and technical objectives. So the organizational ranges from policies for information security, roles and responsibilities, the segregation of duties, how it is done, labeling of information, not to prioritize the information transfer, access control processes and policies, identity management, so on and so forth. Regarding people, we have the screening of candidates for the organization, terms and conditions of employment, like NDAs or any other types of signed agreements. Information security awareness, education and training, disciplinary processes, remote working policies. As for physical, we have physical perimeters, like buildings, the cameras to control who accesses the room, physical security monitoring. So any protective mechanisms against physical and environmental threats, like seismic activities. If the building is in a very active seismic place of the world, controls must be in place. So this is not only the digital technical part, we have to consider a whole other dimensions in order to maintain security of data. And then we have the technical part, which has to do with user endpoint devices, privileged access rights, managing technical vulnerabilities, data masking, data leakage prevention, information backup, monitoring activities. So I'm not going to go into much detail here. So this is a quick view of what is ISO 27001. And now we are going to move to ISO 27701. So ISO 27701 is a standard that extends the ISO 27001 standard for private information management. It specifies requirements and provides guidance for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving a privacy information management system, or PIMS. So it is an extension. If you want to implement ISO 27701, you must have ISO 27001 already implemented. So it provides the PIMS related requirements and provides guidance for PII controls and PII processors, holding responsibility and accountability for PII processing. PII means private identifiable information, personal identifiable information. So this standard reflects in their considerations and clauses the privacy principles, and they are the consent and choice, which has to do with the agreement of the data holder or the principal. We have the purpose, legitimacy, and specification, which has to do with why is the data being collected? So it must be clear and must follow a legal purpose. So users should know exactly why their data is being collected. Principle number 3, collection limitation. Only collect the minimum data needed for the purpose. Data minimization has to do with storing and sharing the least amount of data necessary for the purposes. Principle number 5, use, retention, and disclosure limitation. We should use only the data for intended purposes. We should not keep data longer than needed, and we should not share it unnecessarily. Principle 6, accuracy and quality. Data must be correct and up to date, and there must be mechanisms for the users to fix the mistake. Principle number 7, openness, transparency, and notice. So the organization must clearly explain what data is collected, why, and how it's used, and should make privacy policies easy to find and understand. Principle number 8, individual participation and access. So users should be able to access and manage their data easily. Principle number 9, accountability. The organization should follow their privacy rules and should keep privacy practice well documented. Principle 10, information security. This had to do with all the information security controls that we saw in ISO 27001. And the principle 11, privacy compliance. We have to regularly monitor, evaluate, and ensure compliance with applicable privacy regulations and standards, like the GDPR and the Euro. So these standards follows closely the ISO 27001, and it even follows the same plan, do, check, act cycle. Okay, one needs only, and I say only as a quote, we need to only consider in each of the clauses of ISO 27001 the roles of the PII controller or processor, the concerns or principles of privacy that we saw, and that's it. We need to consider in each of the clauses all the PIMS scope and consideration, so on and so forth. And this standards also has 2 annexes, Annex A and Annex B controls, which have to do with controls for the PII controllers, and controls for the PII processors. It is organized by conditions for collection and processing, obligation to PII principals, which are the owners of the data, the privacy by design and privacy by default controls, and PII sharing and transfer and disclosure. Okay, so as examples, we have for the first category, the identification, documentation of the purpose, identification of lawful basis, privacy impact assessment, contractors with PII processors. For the PII processor with the customer agreement, we have organization purposes, so on and so forth. Obligation, we have, for example, determining information for PII principals, providing information to the principals, so on and so forth. PI processors must follow obligations to the PI principles. Privacy by design and privacy by default, we have the limiting collections, limiting processing, accuracy and quality of the data. So these all reflect the principles that we saw. It has to do with, this category has to do with sharing, transfer, disclosure, what is permitted, what is not permitted, what mechanisms should be in place, encryption, so on, so forth. And we have reached the end of the presentation. I hope this presentation was short enough with the most information that you can use in your day-to-day life, let's say, or professional life. And we are open for Q&A. So let me see here in the Q&A box if we have any questions. So Mitre attack, Mitre defense could be part of the process. Yes, it could be. So when you are considering, for example, only the risk management process, you can use whatever controls or whatever threat modeling you want. And MitraTech and MitraDefend are very good in that. And you can also use in combination with ISO 27001. But in 27001, you need to follow the control objective structure. Okay. But apart from that, you can use it. Okay, you're welcome, Disco. Thank you. So any other questions? So we still have some minutes here.
Hi everybody, here is Galileo Disperati from Martel Innovator. We are behind the technical organization of this webinar. Yeah, I just want to point out that we have also a few minutes left. So if you have any question, please, by any means, don't be shy. João is here to answer.
Yeah, and also if you have any questions afterwards, please feel free to contact us. So you can contact us either by the project website or by the LinkedIn. It's up to you. So I see that Ricardo raised a hand.
Please, Ricardo, nice to meet you. You have the possibility to talk if you want.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you very much.
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes. Well, I just wanted to comment to thank you, Dr. Rodrigues, for your excellent presentation. I think it is absolutely in line with the, let's say, the objectives that we have within CYLCOMED about the training sessions. And yeah, you have, in my opinion, you have highlighted the key points for all partners to be aware of the potentially applicable standards that may be useful for their cybersecurity tools development. So thank you very much for your kind offer to do this presentation, and thank you for the excellent presentation you have made.
Thank you for your kind words. You're very welcome.
If there are no questions, I think maybe we can bring the webinar to a close. I thank again João for his availability and for preparing so well. I just want to remind all the participants that the recording, as soon as it's ready, will be slightly edited and then made available to the CYLCOMED website, and we also distributed to the registered participants via the registration system platform Tito, which was used for this webinar. Thanks again, everyone, for participating, and yeah, have a good rest of the day, and yeah, we'll be in touch soon with follow-ups to this. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can see our email in the chat. Thanks again.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for participating. So have a nice day.